What's up, everybody? It's Greg with Delta, and this is the Be the Difference podcast. This podcast is all about making you a better person in your life and in your business with coaching on sales, leadership, mindset, marketing, everything under the sun when it comes to being an entrepreneur. We bring on guest speakers. Today, I've got the honor and pleasure of welcoming Mr. Glenn. Is it Poulos?
Poulos.
Man, yeah. I usually get it. So, all righty. So, Glenn, how you doing, man?
Good, thanks. Thanks, Greg. Great intro, too, to your show. I loved it. That was awesome.
I appreciate it. I appreciate that. So, for those of you that don't know Glenn, Glenn is the co-founder, vice president, and general manager of Gap Wireless, Inc., a leading distributor for the mobile, broadband, wireless, and test and measurement equipment markets. With over 3 decades of experience in sales, he has spent thousands of hours in the field or on the phone with customers and working with salespeople to help create several key successful companies. That is awesome. You know what? I was just saying before we started, I love talking about sales. So
yeah, me too.
Let's jump in. How did you start in sales, Glenn?
I will tell you that as well. And also, I also have this little saying, like nothing happens in any company until someone sells something, right? So, everyone, lots of good ideas out there, but someone's got to want to buy them, right? And the funny thing about sales is that I started out as in Canada, I'm in Toronto, right? Canada, we call them civil servants. So I worked for the federal government and the weather service, and I was an electronic technician. I went to school for electronics, and my boss pulled me aside and he said, you need to leave the government. You're not the right fit. I recommend you go into sales. And I don't remember really questioning him on it. I took it at face value, and I started looking for a job, and I ended up jumping ship from the government and getting my first job in sales back in the mid 80s. And and that's where a lot of the rules in my book that I came out with started formulating, and I started writing them down. And but I worked for some people there for about 5 years, just prior to me. I was approaching 30 years of age, and I had this sort of thing that, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to start a business, and it has to be before I'm 30. And I mean, I was lucky in the sense that sort of good luck and opportunity, when, good luck is when opportunity meets preparation and that kind of thing. Right. And so an opportunity came up where I was able to cobble together some different companies that I could create a sales company around. And I did approach my my employer and say, hey, I'd like to spin off this division and add these products to this, and create a separate, more focused company on this newfangled technology. And I said, and you guys can own some of it. I'll own some of it. I get to be an entrepreneur, and the president of the company says, no, that's never going to work. You could show me your plan, but you're better to stick to your knitting and just keep at it here. You're doing well. And the next day I ended up resigning. Right. And, the newfangled technology that I was basing the technology around was the cell phone, right? And of course, we all know the cell phone never went anywhere, right? And like, who needs a cell phone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'd been married at the time. I'd been married 6 days, and I resigned from my job, and it was in 1991, and I started my first sales company. And worked that for about 15 years, sold that business, and then started another company, which was Gap Wireless. And Gap Wireless is really from my name, GP. And the A is the vowel I needed in order to create a word. And I ran that for 15 years, and I sold it last year to U.S. private equity. And they agreed but they asked me, and I agreed to stay on and working here as an employee. For some period of time. And that's probably the strangest change in my life I've ever, starting the multiple companies. That sort of came very naturally. Becoming an employee of a much bigger company, private equity, I'd never really worked with them in this way before. It's probably the biggest change in my life, right? In the last year, having a job and a boss and all that stuff. Right. So,
yeah. So, I want to back up.
Sure.
You talked about some of the rules that you were writing down as you were in sales and things that you were learning. Let's break some of those out. What are some of these rules that you wrote down that you had taken with you in sales?
So the first one, and of course I always get a reaction in this day and age, but the first rule is always never fax the facts and never ship the shit, right? And people are like, no one uses faxes anymore. And I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, don't email it either, right? And so what I mean is that, I'm selling high ticket items, right? And they don't all, I mean, mine tend to be technology items, but they are high ticket sales, and they cost thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in some cases even millions of dollars, right? And that stuff does not get sold over the internet. It gets sold person to person, face to face, company to company, and people want to look and see and feel and touch it and work it and make sure this stuff fits their business and what they need. And so I learned early on that, you know, there was a tendency, of course, in 1986, we got our first fax machine, right? And it changed the world, because before that we would have quotes and we would have to either mail it to them, you know, or we would drop the quote off. And that was where I learned the real power was in the dropping off of the quote, right? And so, and of course, then later the fax came out. He's like, oh, just fax it to me, right? And so I've created some other rules, which I'll tell you in a sec, but I realized it was never in my benefit to just fax the fax, right? And often when they wanted to look at our equipment, you know, our stuff, our shit, right, as I call it, right, never ship the shit, right? So if they want to look at something, I'm going to drop it off, I'm going to set it up, going to make sure you know what you're doing with it, and then I'll leave it. And so that's one of my core rules. One of the other rules is when you're dropping the stuff off, the name of my book, of course, is never sit in the lobby. So of course that's one of the rules, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, what do you mean never sit in the lobby? Where should I sit? In my car? And I'm like, no, you shouldn't be sitting anywhere. Like, you should be standing up waiting. And and so the never sit in the lobby is basically show up on time, and either if there's a receptionist, announce yourself. Or, you know, a lot of times now there's a lobby phone. You call up, you say, hey, Jack, you wanted that quote? I'm in the lobby. Can you pop down? I'm going to drop it off. And, you know, and they come down. And when they come down, you don't want to be on the phone, texting the wife, looking at Facebook. You want to be paying attention and standing up, you know, and ready to engage with the customer. And
these are very, very basic. I mean, these are just rules to live by, period.
But most people don't live by them.
They don't live by them. It's like common sense. It's not very common, you know?
Right.
And to go back to your first rule, when I first started in sales, I can't tell you how many times that people would be like, hey, just send me the information. Just email me the information. And it's easy to fall victim to that trap.
Right.
And be like, okay, well, they said they want me to email. They're not going to be interested. There's never once that I've emailed information, and I did it a lot before someone was like, stop doing that. Stop wasting your time. Just really keep calling them, or try to schedule an appointment to go sit down with them face to face.
Right. So,
so
that happens all the time. And so a lot of the sales guys will ask me, or if I'm, you know, talking to people about the concepts, right, they'll say, well, what do you do when they say that? Right. And when that happens and the guy said, hey, can you send me a quote for such and such, right? And I'm like, sure. You know, can I drop it off? And no, just send it to me. And I'm like, okay. I said, well, I'm already scheduled to be there on Thursday morning to drop something else off. Can I just drop it off in the lobby for you? And you're like, okay, well, if you're going to be here and drop it off, sure, just drop it off. But I'm busy. And I'm like, okay, no problem. And so what I'll typically do, and again, I'm in Toronto, Canada, right? And in Canada, Tim Hortons donuts are like crack, right? And they are the most popular thing, right? And so I always say, always show up before 10:30 so that you can bring donuts, right? And you don't want to wreck the guy's lunch, so you have to bring the donuts early, right? And so I'd show up in the lobby on Thursday with a box of donuts, because one of my other rules is always have something in your hand and something in your mind, right? So I'll show up, obviously I have the quote in my hand as well, but I'll have a box of donuts. That way, if there's a receptionist, you can say, hey, Jack, Glenn's here with your quote. And he brought a dozen donuts, and the guy forgot that he told me 2 days ago that he was too busy, and he 99% of the time they agree to pop down to get the quote, right? Then, you know, you're not expecting much more than that, but he'll pop down. You give him, you know, pass off the donuts to the reception lady. She starts, you know, looks for the Boston cream, whatever. And, you know, you're in her good graces. You sort of flip open the quote, hand it to him, say, hey, you know, here's that quote you were looking for. Just, can I get a initial reaction? What's this look like? And again, you're not expecting much other than the reaction itself, right? Is he disinterested or curious or what have you? And then one of my other rules that I engage at that point, you're just standing in the lobby at this point now, is always ask for a mini tour, right? Because again, I'm I'm selling products to companies that go into the companies themselves, right? So if you imagine, you're selling lab equipment to companies that run a bunch of labs, right? Can you give me a mini tour of your new lab that you're setting up that you need this equipment for, that you asked me for the quote that you didn't want me to drop off, right?
Yeah.
Because I need to go and look in that lab and see whose competitors are sitting on the bench right now, because they might have 9 boxes from some other dude and they're just looking for a quote from me to keep the real vendor honest, right? Or it may be open season. There may be nothing there, but by walking through, and into the lab and seeing what's going on, I can see where I'm at, right? And so I always ask for a mini tour, right? And a mini tour is a tour that's mini, right? So the guy's like, "Oh, a tour," and I'm like, "Yeah, look, just show me around the lab." I said, "Don't worry, I won't sell any encyclopedias while I'm here, and I just want a quick look around." And usually, for the most part, they usually do let you in. Then the next rule, of course, is never forget a face, right? So again, my company, we tend to deal with accounts over, we have a book of accounts across Canada and the US, and the salesman has maybe 50, 75 customers, and he has a list of people he knows at each account, right? And so I always coach them before you go in the lobby, because you remember, never sit in the lobby. So if you have a few minutes to wait, go in your car, flip open your phone, go on LinkedIn and remember everyone's face before you go in the building, right? So Sally, that's that tall girl with red hair. Jack, he's bald. The short dude, that's Bob, whatever. And remember everyone's face before you walk in the building. Because we've all been to an event and someone remembers you. "Hey, Greg, how's it going?" And you're like, "Oh, hey, and your brain is just like firing on every cylinder and you can't find the name fast. Know it's in there, but you just can't get it right fast enough.
Yeah.
And so, by remembering it, you're walking down the hall on your mini tour to this guy who may have just met you. And you're like, "Oh, hey, Bob, hey, Jack, hey, Sally," and this guy's, "Well, shit, this guy knows everybody." And
that's actually really powerful.
It is. It is.
You don't realize how powerful that is.
Yeah. And it's the same thing, like if you take your kid to a soccer game or whatever, right? And all the parents, and they all remember your name and you can't remember their names, right? And I mean, it's, any opportunity to use a person's name is really gains you a lot of rapport, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everything I'm doing is a series of towards my overall governing mantra for my business and my life, which is always, how to get, act, and stay in front of customers, and to be a pleasure to do business with always, even when you don't get the business, right? A lot of guys, "Oh, yeah, screw you, you didn't give me the order," and you're like stomping off and they're shitting way, "Oh, you're going to regret that." Or like, so many of my customers have told me, like, "You're such a pleasure to do business with, even when we can't give you the business for this reason or that reason," or, you're not always going to get the business, right?
Yeah.
Some of my other rules, right, about getting the business, right, is that if you can't sell, if you get your job in sales and you realize that you're working for brand 3 or brand 4, quit your job right away. Go get a job at number 1 or number 2, because everyone's going to buy, 80% of the people are going to buy brand 1. The 80% of the rest are going to buy brand 2. So if you're brand 3 or 4, you're fighting on 4% of the business.
Yeah.
And you could be the best sales guy in the world, but there's only a mathematically limited pool of product for you to sell because everyone else is buying the good stuff. So don't waste your career selling crap, right? Like, fine, cut your teeth for a few months, learn the space that you're in. It doesn't matter what it is. And then go and get a better job at a better company where you can shine and outsell the competitors, right? With the top product, because, you only get one shot at, at every day of your life, right? So you want to make the best of each one, right? And so those are a few of the rules that sort of, like, because the subtitle on the book is 57 factors to build a career in selling, right? And so it's just a series of barrage of rules that I follow every day to try to be a pleasure, right? So
I like that, and here's why this is so important. When it comes to sales, when it comes to like owning a business and having a product and providing a service, you have to, they have to, like you were saying, you got to provide such a service that they take immense pleasure, even if they don't do business, because they're going to remember you. And there's going to come a time that they're probably going to buy said product again. Maybe the last company or product they used wasn't up to par, and maybe the salesperson just disappeared after they sold, and the account, whoever's managing the account, isn't doing a good job. Many different things happen, and then they remember you. They reach out, you come up, and you're still the same person. You're just very
exactly
likable, right? You provide an undeniably great customer experience.
That's right.
So
that's the key to my business and my success in sales. And I mean, that's really that simple. And my competitors have acknowledged it over the years, right? That my customers have definitely acknowledged it. And I mean, and I'm trying to create a world where I'm always, trying to find ways to get back in front of the customer, not to be sitting in the lobby, not faxing the fax, not shipping the shit, right? So every opportunity that I have, I'm trying to re-engage with customers, right? He wants something and then he wants a demo. So fine, I'm going to drop it off. I'm going to be there next Thursday. It's like, oh, okay, fine, drop it off, right? And then next Thursday you're there, and then you create other reasons to go see other people in that building, or follow up on a sale you made a year ago to another guy in another part of the business, or and usually that's why I never had to spend a lot of time with that sort of prospecting where it was like I had nothing to do and nowhere to go on that day. For me, it was more, I'd already, when I go to this customer, I already know the next time I'm going to be going back, because I'm trying to all the time I'm with that customer, I'm figuring out how can I get back here, and when is it? Is it 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months? But I'm going to set it up right then in real time if possible.
Yeah.
And then I can use that to leverage other people, right? So I can say, hey, I'm, it's Tuesday, and it's like, hey, I'm got a meeting with Jack on Thursday at 10. Can I get 5 minutes with you in the lobby? And they're like, okay, sure, no problem. And then you stack up 3 or 4 of those. You ask them for a mini tour, and and then based on the results and the opportunities that come out of that, you book your next set of meetings. And the one of the great stories, there's a series of stories I tell about traveling to Winnipeg in Canada, which we call Winter Peg, right? And because it's basically summer or -40, right? And like the summers there are beautiful, but man, like it's probably already snowing there, right? It's August, and and people hate going to Winnipeg in the winter. And I used to go every 6 to 8 weeks like clockwork. I had it dialed in, and in the beginning I had to build up a set of like ways to get into see the clients. But when I was there, I'm back in 8 weeks, so can I drop by with such and such, or this or that or whatever? And I never had to work to get the meetings. And then I started to get success in Winnipeg because I was the only one that was showing up. Everyone else was faxing the fax, shipping the shit, et cetera, right? And so people there would value the effort of you coming every 8 weeks and visiting them and being a true sales rep and account manager and what have you, right? And then I noticed with my competitors and stuff that they would realize, hey, we lost all this business in Winnipeg and this and that, whatever. Get your ass to Winnipeg, and they'd show up to Winnipeg once, right? It would be -40, the car wouldn't start, and the guys are like, this is bullshit. There's nothing here. Like, I don't know what he's doing, blah blah blah. But and they'd go back on their way, and they wouldn't come back again for another year or two. Meanwhile, 8 weeks later, I was back, and again, I was just building rapport with those people, and and practicing the other things that I do, and my 57 tips, right?
I like that. So have you always been B2B? No, never like B2C?
Yeah. So always been B2B. Yeah.
Which the strategies that you're talking about, they work for B2C also in terms of just overall good open-ended strategies in order to be a good person, right?
Right. So
what was the first company that you started?
So my first company was called Wave Technologies, Millimeter Wave Technologies, and waves all have a size, right? Like there's a wavelength, and I mean the cellular technology that we're in is now based on millimeter wave technology. And way back in the 90s, I had known that it would all be about high frequency later on, and I named my company after it. It was a very esoteric term at the time, but it ended up being very sort of like forward thinking in a way, right? And so, and I mean, we sold little bits and pieces to the companies that built the cellular network, right? And everything from little widgets to big antennas up on towers and things like that. And then I ended up selling that company to a bigger mobile wireless company. And then I ended up having the opportunity to build another company similar in nature, but I'd learned a lot in those 15 years, and we'd taken on some low aspects of customer service that I didn't really like, and and not always being a pleasure to do business with, right? And it's kind of hard to put your finger on like exactly what it was. It didn't deliberately piss off customers, but I thought, when I redo this, I'm going to do it my way from the get-go. And we're always going to be a pleasure to do business with. And that doesn't mean that you say yes when you need to say no, right? Like, one of my rules in the book is freedom begins with no. But we're always a pleasure to do business with, regardless of the situation, right? And another one of my favorite rules, is thank God it's broken, right? And that's sort of to train people that are sales guys, where, hey, when the customer calls because we broke the thing and it's broken, doesn't work, and there's a problem with it, like, don't hide under your desk and ask Sally, the returns girl, to take the call and deal with the pissed off customer. You should be grabbing that phone as fast as you can and saying, hey, what can I do to help you? Can I get you a loaner? Can I do this? Whatever. Don't worry, I'll be there every step of the way. Yeah, I know you're pissed off. I know your production line is at risk. Let me call the factory. Let us do this. Let us get you air freight. Let us do, and the customers end up remembering who picked up the phone when the product was broken. That's all they end up remembering, right? They don't remember the guy who drives a Porsche and took the order, didn't do any work, and then took off and never came back, right?
Yeah.
They don't care about any of that. They care about the guy who's there when they need him. And then when you quote on a deal a year later and you're 3% higher, the guy's like, I don't care about 3%. I know that when I call, that Glenn's going to answer the phone. To me, that's worth 3%.
Yeah.
And and those are sort of the, that's why people pay more for certain products, right? Like, otherwise nobody would be driving a Mercedes Benz, right? If service and quality didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And,
you're absolutely right. And what salespeople don't, especially junior salespeople, they don't realize is that the price is the last factor that even matters. It's it's literally the last thing. They care more about quality. They care more about what this product's going to do for them, about like the emotion of
how it's going to make them feel.
How it's going to make them feel. The price is the last thing.
Yeah.
So absolutely. So you did that. You said you did that company for 15 years.
Yeah. And I sold it to a public company. It didn't actually go flawlessly. It was, the company was kind of a rating, one of the raider kind of public companies, that, and I was kind of unsophisticated in the public equity markets and what have you. And it ended up being, although I ended up with millions of dollars of shares later, that company's shares ended up dropping in value, and it became a hollow victory, let's call it that, which is why I had to start over. And because there wasn't enough there to, retire at 40 something years of age. Right. And when I sold the company, the second company, I took an all cash deal this time. And, so that was an interesting lesson, where I was so enamored with them being interested in buying my business and how much money they were going to throw me. I didn't take the time to do due diligence on the people buying me. They were doing incredible amounts of due diligence on me and the quality of my revenue and all that stuff. But I was like naive and, you
didn't know what you didn't know. You'd never done that before.
Right. And so, but I ended up having lots more runway in my career. And so, I was able to build a company I was even more proud of the second time. Right. And, and I learned a lot more about when I was selling it, that I needed to do proper due diligence on who was buying me, as well as the other way around. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What's probably, so I want to dig in the weeds, because you got so much sales experience, but also the just business experience. Having a company that's successful for 15 years that you eventually sell off, whether you did it a good way or not, it's still a massive success.
Yeah.
And so, what are some of the takeaways and like the biggest lessons you learned in that first time that you were able to take this to your second company in order to make it even stronger or just better the second time?
Mainly the biggest thing it always ends up coming down to is is about leverage and people, right? And the fact that, like, you have to have good people, because good people create leverage, right? Whereas bad people create kind of like a boat anchor around your neck, right? And so leverage allows you to, I mean, it's like buying a stock on leverage or whatever. You put in $1, but you get $10 worth of stock, right? I mean, that's what a good employee does for you, right? You get way more value out of them than their cost. And they allow you to be doing something different rather than managing them, because they're managing themselves or they're managing a group of other people for you, right? So, and so it's always about the people, and constantly, creating an environment for your good people to thrive, grow, and what have you, and to cull the bad people out of the organization. And, and I mean, I hate to say it, but there's, a certain aspect of always be firing, right? Like, and you think that that's a bad thing or whatever, but you're actually doing everyone a favor usually when you fire someone, because they're not a right fit. So clearly it's not really good for them, because they're not thriving, they're not doing well, and they're not helping you. And so by keeping bad people, it's never a good thing. And when you start to add good people to your organization, you end up getting more and more freedom out of it, right? When you're a leader and you've got a perfect management team under you, there's nothing to do, right? All you have to do is lead the organization and make decisions in a timely manner. And that's what the true leader's job is. And a lot of people really struggle to make decisions. And so it's like, well, I can do that job. I'll take that job tomorrow, right? And it's like, yeah, you say that, but the reason you're not a leader today is because you're not capable of making decisions under pressure and duress, right? And so, there was a time in one of the businesses, the second business, where this is hard to believe, but we went from 80 people to 29 people in one day. And I had a business partner. I called him up and I basically said, I've decided this is what we need to do. We got to make some cuts. We're not going to make it unless we make some deep adjustments to the fundamental core management of the business and the markets that we're serving. And he's like, what do we got to do? And I said, we got to go from 80 to 29 people. And this is how we're going to do it. Right. And we already, one of it, like a large portion of the people, 40 of them went in one fell swoop. We were able to sell the business to another company, that division. And we already knew the guys were interested. We were able to make a phone call and say, hey, do you want to go for this deal? And, and then there was another small piece that we actually sold as well to a different company. And there ended up only being 5 or 6 adjustments. And all those people ended up getting jobs in the related industry, and it was fine. And we went on for record profits and continued on record profits for 3 more years until we sold the business for, record price in our opinion, and in the mid 8 figures. Right. And and that's what made the difference. We probably might not have even been in business if I hadn't have made that decision. And the question is, who's going to make a decision to cut that many people from a business in one day, right? Because he says to me, well, when are we going to do it? And I was like 8 o'clock in the morning. I said, well, we're going to be done by 10 a.m. And he's like, nah, no, we're not. And I'm like, you watch. And we made a couple phone calls. We called a few people in, boom, and it was done. And the people fundamentally really just want to be led by someone that knows how to lead. I mean, like, they just don't want a wishy-washy leader, right? Someone that doesn't make a decision, doesn't have vision. And when you explain to people after the fact, this is our plan, these are the markets we're focused in, these were the markets we're divesting of, and the reasons why were because of X, Y, and Z. And most people, 99 times out of 100, will fall into lockstep behind a properly thought out decision and a leader that has the forthright, ability to make those choices. And they fall in line. Right. And, and what ended up helping us to grow in the coming years was really the people, which is your first question, was what was what made it all work. Right. It's always about the people. And the other it's kind of like a joke or whatever, but a lot of times, go to like meetings, networking things or whatever. People are like, oh, I'm struggling with this guy and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, oh, I said, well, when was the first time you ever thought of like letting them go? And it's like, okay, well, like maybe last February there was I said, that's the day you should have fired him. Like the first moment that you feel that they're not the right fit, let them go. And within as fast as possible after that moment, they're never going to change. It's never going to get better. And there's no crime in adjusting the size and shape of the workforce, and you're not actually like a bad person toward that person because they're not a right fit.
Yeah.
So they will do better and thrive better somewhere else. And I mean, I'm not saying to be a prick about it. You have to like help people to find jobs, and you have to do it in a responsible, ethical, and legal manner and what have you. But stringing people along and let's give them another year and see if they can hit quota, meanwhile they're at 20% of plan, and it's just not the right, you got to make those tough choices in a timely manner.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think this is a problem that I've experienced in sales organizations when you have a sales force that's like 1099 and you don't have direct like W-2 control over them because they're 1099, but they are a part of your organization and they do represent your organization. And people look at performance because it's, hey, this person's a great salesperson. Yeah, but if they're like if they're a shitty person, then you got to get rid of them. I don't care how much they sell, they need to go. Right. And because the rest of your organization is suffering, whether you know it or not, when they see that you are accepting of bad behavior.
Right.
As a leader.
Right. And we didn't get a chance today to talk too much about the core values and what have you, but we spent a lot of time developing our core values. And around the time shortly after the time we made the large restructuring in 2019, we took on this system called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Mm-hmm. And they really spend a lot of time up front making sure your core values, and then showing you how to train and motivate, hire, fire, reward based on core values. And to what you just said a second ago, they show you that a guy who's like high performance but low core values, they call it the terrorist, right? And he drags everyone down with him, right? And so it's like he doesn't follow any rules. He won't use the CRM. Nothing's fits for him, and he needs special treatment. And they show you that they're not doing you any, even though they're over quota, they're not doing you any favors, right? And and so high performance, low core values is the same as low performance, low core values. Yep. Right. Neither one of them is good for the organization. And, and I never, I'm 61 years old. I mean, I never had such an exercise in this core value thing until, a few years ago, but a little over 4 years ago, I guess. And I mean, I'm such a convert now. And I don't mean like just Googling it and saying, give me 4 core values and then telling the staff what your core values are. Yeah. I mean, like taking an entire day with the leadership of the business and testing and vetting these core values and what do they mean and what are the subtext of each core value and and how what do they mean in terms of the real world, and so that's a huge part as well about operating a successful business, right? And
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. And core values is so it's overlooked. It's in such a massive way by so many companies and so many small business owners. I don't care if your team is just you and one other person or just you. You still need to have core values because that is how you are going to attract the right clientele. That's how you're going to attract the right.
That's right.
Future employees. How you're going to hire and fire by them, like you said, and just how you interact. With each other, with vendors, with third-party companies, with your clientele. That's how you interact with these people.
That's right.
That's what they're going to remember you by.
Yeah. Like, I'm so glad you said that. We've actually fired vendors where it's like, why would you fire a vendor? Because they didn't meet our core values, right? Like we have rules like we'll compete against anyone in the market except for the manufacturer. Right. Yeah. Like we're not going to go and call on our customers, open up the doors to our biggest customers, and then find out our supplier is competing against us. Right. Mm-hmm. That's bad core values that they would even operate an organization that operates in that manner. Right. And so, you're right. It's not just like your staff. It is your vendors and your suppliers, like your bank and all that stuff too. Right.
Yeah. So and for certain businesses, it's even your clientele. Yeah. So I have a coaching business and I am very picky. I do not take everybody on because if somebody can't follow simple instructions, then they're not going to follow my coaching program.
Right.
And if they're paying but not following my coaching program, and they look like crap and they act like crap, it's like, well, they're a walking representation of what my pizza program is.
Right.
So
exactly.
I need to make sure that they're actually following it, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If they don't follow my core values or believe in the same things that I believe in, then I'm just not gonna waste my time. I'll just tell like, hey, I don't think we're a good fit. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
It's not about the money for me. It's about actually changing someone's life.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really good.
So your second company, you said you had it for 5 years and then sold it?
So the first company was 15 years, and then I started a different company, and 15 years later I sold that, and that was in 2022. That was last year, and so now I'm an employee.
They kept you on as employee. Nice.
Yeah.
And you said it's quite a big shift.
Yeah. I would like to say I used to have blonde hair a year ago, and now it's gray. But like it's quite different, and because I moved so quickly in a private company, we'd fluctuated between 30 and 70 people over the years or whatever, and we're still sort of the same size now. But I mean, we're now part of a company that's private equity. They own silos all over North America, different technology silos, and they have huge, metrics that they govern things by, and the board makes decisions, and and I'm fine with all the way they do it or whatever. It's just not in my nature. It's like, I want to do this and I want to change a piece of technology, and now I have to get it vetted, and then I'm trying to explain to people why, and I mean, it was just easier if I could just make the decision on my own, right? And live or die by the consequences. I'm happy to do that. And so I just realized, I guess I'm kind of a small company kind of a guy, and it's just the way I'm put together. Whereas other people thrive in bigger companies, right? And like Ford or GM or General Electric or something, where they, they're corporate people and they know how to work the corporate world, right? I'm more entrepreneurial, small business, fast moving, and and so but I mean, there's only a finite amount of time I'll work here, and then I will end up moving on. So, and I am enjoying helping them to build the business. They bought some other companies, and we're integrating them into the main company, and that was something I've never done before, and so that's kind of an interesting. Yeah.
Okay. So you said you wrote a book.
I did.
How long ago did you publish it?
So the funny thing was that I've started writing the book. I started taking the notes in the 80s. I wrote the book during the pandemic when I was stuck at home. We had a big lockdown, really severe in Canada. It was quite lengthy, right? And so I had nowhere to go, nothing to do on the weekends. And so during the pandemic, I wrote the book, and because of delays and this and that, the week that I published the book was the same week that I sold the business. And so it was like in February of 2022, right? And it was really kind of at odds between, trying to do this virtual book tour and, promote it online versus attending to the sale of the business. Right. And I mean, mathematically, obviously I had to attend to the sale of the business because just for financial reasons and what have you. Right. But it's been very fun. And, and the whole process of writing the book was fun. And, a lot of people ask me, how'd you do it and whatever. And I mean, I took the advice of somebody I heard on a podcast, which was just sit down every morning and write a certain number of words, a certain amount of time until the book is finished, right? Like just commit to a schedule, right?
That's what I did. I did 1,000 words a day.
Yeah. Right. And I did 2,500 on the weekend because during the week, it just wasn't, my schedule didn't really permit it. So I did mine on the weekends, and And so, as I like to joke, I wrote 2,500 words every weekend until I got to 75,000 words. Then I will send it for its first edit. And when she removed the F word from the book, I agreed to publish the book at 71,000 words. And she's like, "Oh, you can't swear that much in a book." And, and so I'm just embellishing, but yeah, so the book's around 71,000 words, and plus or minus a few swear words that came in or out. And lots of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. What's the name of the book? Where can they find?
It's on Amazon, or you can go to my website, glennpoulos.com, but it's called Never Sit in the Lobby.
Never Sit in the Lobby.
Yeah. And So.
Well, Glenn, I appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your wisdom and your insights from your experience in sales and business leadership. And the last question I always ask all my guests is, you have the opportunity to sit with, learn from, break bread with 3 individuals, anyone in history, alive or deceased, who would they be and why?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh man, that's a good one. So yeah, I mean, I would probably pick Warren Buffett for because I really struggle in the finance and to try to understand, how he's built such a epic empire and based on his discipline and and I sometimes struggle with those kinds of disciplines and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
The Probably like Nikola Tesla, because I mean I know what he's responsible for in terms of inventions and things like that. And I don't know, probably like someone like interesting like Robert Redford or some actor or someone like that just to something that's not really about business or technology. I mean, but yeah, because I am a bit of a geek for entertainment and stuff like that. So probably someone famous in that regard.
Well, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. That's awesome. Yeah. So thank you so much, Glenn, for jumping on the podcast.
Oh,
I
happy
appreciate it. I know that this was a lot of value that was provided. And if for those of you who are listening or watching, obviously you got some value if you watch until now. So do me a favor. It takes 30 to 60 seconds to rate, review, subscribe, share this content with somebody else that can learn, especially if they're in a B2B sales environment or they're just in business and they want to learn more from something that is experienced that's sold to companies that they have built over a 15-year period for both of them. It means the world to both Glenn and I, but it takes you a couple moments to help us out. So this has been the Be the Difference podcast. I'm your host, Greg Birch. Until next time, we'll see you.
Thanks, Greg.